Okay, hi everybody. I apologize for the delay. The Mishnah that we're studying, the next line, which we're not going to actually address today, because I want to talk about Selihot, but the Mishnah that we are discussing, the next line that we were scheduled to address is the statement or the assertion or the advice by the admonition by Hillel Zaken that b'makom she'ein anashim mishtadel leotish. If there are people who are, if there's a lack of people to stand up and be counted to do the right thing, then try to do it yourself. And so the reason I was late today is because I had. I was asked to, or had the opportunity to sit on a conversion bet in the area, and the truth of the matter is that this is a relatively new thing for me. I've been part of the conversion advocacy world for a long time, but I finally realized or thought that it's time for me to put my money where my mouth was. So I have the privilege of sitting on a Beit Din for conversion, and the proceedings went overtime, and that's why we started late. So that was my Pishtatel Leodish. Okay, I wanted to talk about Slichot for the simple reason that I think that there are many aspects of Slichot that really don't get the kind of attention that they deserve, and I thought I would share with you some insights that have come to me over the past couple of weeks and leading up to Slichot. One of the purposes of Slichot is to intensify the run-up to, or the preparations for, the Yamim Noraim, and given the fact that these are intensive times, anyways, I thought it would be appropriate. Okay, Slichot. If you look up in Wikipedia, which is sometimes a decent source, Slichot are often pegged to the period of immediately after the sealing of the Babylonian Talmud. In other words, they say they're late post-Talmudic, and that the poetry that we recite as part of the Slichot, at least Ashkenazim do, is relatively late. It's after the Bible, it's after the Talmud, and from the 7th century on, we find people saying Slichot. I'm not going to talk about what Slichot are yet. Okay? However, if you take a much closer look at it, that statement is, what shall we say, misleading. At the center of Slichot is an episode in the Torah immediately following the story of the golden calf. Moshe Rabbeinu manages to get the Jews, get the Israelites forgiven by God. And then, as part of this back and forth between him and God, Moshe Rabbeinu says to God, Hareini na et derachecha, show me how you relate to the world. Show me how you manifest yourself. So God says, listen, no human being can ever comprehend God. However, what I can show you is certain ways in which I relate to people that you can. I don't like this expression, but that's what they say nowadays, right? Wrap your head around. And so he puts Moshe Rabbeinu in a cleft in the rock, and he passes over and reveals himself that he is he reveals what are called the 13 attributes of mercy. Yud Gimel Midot HaRachamim. God is before the person who sinned, and afterwards he's long forbearing and abundant in kindness, and so on and so forth. And that's what a person can hang on to. That's what a person can attach themselves to. Ad kan. Interestingly, though, if you take a broader view, okay, there was more to that revelation than is explicitly stated in the Bible there in the book of Shemot. Because later on, in the book of Midbar, after the Israelites have messed up and screamed and yelled and bemoaned or accepted the testimony of the spies, and they say, "Oh, this is terrible, this is horrible," and God has had it with them. And he says, "You know what? I'll make you a great nation, Moses. That way, I'll keep my promise to Abraham. But I can't take it with these people." And Moshe Rabbeinu turns to God and says, "You're the one who told me that you, meaning God, relate to the world through mercy, that you're compassionate, that you're long forbearing, and that you're abundant in kindness. That's what you told me. That's what you said. That's how you relate to the world. And that's how you will relate to the Israelites. What happened to that?" And God forgives the people. In other words, what Moshe Rabbeinu is doing is saying, here is something which I have, here is something you told me that this is who you are, and I'm reminding you, and I'm asking you to please relate to us this way. In other words, he turned an act of revelation into a prayer. Okay? This reference, this invocation of the Yud Gimel Midot, of these 13 attributes of mercy, pops up consistently through the Tanakh. For example, the book of Yoel, the prophet Joel, also screaming and yelling and carrying on about how horrible the Jews are, and then he says, "And God is Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed V'Emet." In other words, he directly refers to the fact that God relates to the world through mercy, so that if the Jews would only do Chuva, then they will be able to be forgiven. But again, this is a hook. The Yud Gimel Midot that God revealed to Moses becomes a hook. It becomes a way of bridging the gap, of finding a way back to God. Same thing with Jonah. When we read Jonah, it's the book of Jonah at the end of Yom Kippur, same deal. And this has got nothing to do with Jews. This has got to do with the Syrians, who are really not good people generally. What does Jonah say? Jonah says to God, he says, I ran away because I knew that you're a forgiving God. And I was going to look like an idiot because I'm going to sit there and say Nineveh's going to be destroyed, and you're going to forgive them. Why? Because you are Kel Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, because you are a God of compassion and long forbearing, and so on and so forth. Again, the same refrain. In other words, the revelation of the 13 Midot HaRachamim to Moses was not just intended to give Moses an insight as to how God rules the world, but rather it was intended as a way of providing Jews with an angle to beg for forgiveness and to remind God that this is how you promised to deal with us, and if we commit ourselves to change our ways, if we commit ourselves to do tshuva. So that's the reason why I said this is thing much more, that Selihot are much more ancient than the 7th century. The center of Selihot, with all of the poems and all of the verses and everything else, the center of Selihot is the recitation of the 13 Midot HaRachamim. And the rabbis already in the Talmud say that they sort of anachronistically say that when God revealed the 13 attributes of mercy to Moshe Rabbeinu, it's as if God became a chazan, he became a shlich tzibur, and said to Moshe Rabbeinu, whenever you go into shul and you recite these in front of me, I will remember and I will forgive them. And that's the root of Selihot. So the root of Selihot is not a 7th century early medieval, late antiquity type of thing. It's rooted in a conception which goes back to the Bible and which finds explicit confirmation, explicit expression already in the Talmud. So this is a very, very ancient idea that by us reciting and reminding God, please deal with us the way that you promised, that we will be able to have an opening to be able to be forgiven. It reminds me, actually, there is a very old movie. It's got to be from the 30s, I think, 1930s. Oh, we haven't gotten to the 2030s yet. Okay. There's a very old movie called Elizabeth and Essex, It stars Betty Davis and I think Errol Flynn. I didn't have a chance to double check if it was Errol Flynn or Tyrone Power, one of the two. This kind of person. And Betty Davis plays Queen Elizabeth I, and let's assume it's Errol Flynn plays the Duke of Essex. Duke of Essex was the last of Elizabeth's great favorites, and in the end he rebels against her, and he's sentenced to death for treason. Now, and earlier in the movie, Elizabeth gives him a ring and says, "Take this ring. Whenever I am angry, no matter how angry I am at you, send me the ring, I'll forgive you. I promise." And so that's there. And then towards the end of the movie, as they were taking Essex out to be executed, she sits there at Betty Davis. As Queen Elizabeth goes on and on, "Please send me the ring." Has he sent me the ring? He sent me the ring, because she wants to forgive him. He is an arrogant so and so, and so he just says, "I'm never going to give him. I'd rather die than sort of like give in or ask for forgiveness." Lahavdil elef havdalot, really mutantis mutandis. The Yud Gimel Midot are something similar, but God is giving us the ring, and what we're asked to do is to show the ring, or to recite the ring, or recite the Yud Gimel Midot, and therefore the doors would be open to our. We have to do something. It's not just sending the ring. You've got to do Chuva and all this, and make amends and all the things that are involved. But this is the opening, so that this is a constant. This is a constant theme in the thing that lies behind Selihot. So that Selihot is an opportunity to reconnect with God by our becoming aware of the fact of how He really wants to relate to us. It's interesting. It's interesting that we continue saying Slichot with Yud Gimel Midot. I mean, the poetry before the recitation of the Hashem Kel Rachum V'Chanun is simply introductions, and maybe get to that in a little bit. But we continue to say them. The Sephardim start saying them already, or Mizrahi Jews start saying in Elul. We started Motzei Shabbat, and we'll continue up until and including Yom Kippur. But something really striking happens as you go through Yom Kippur. There is Slichot and Yud Gimel Midot Rachamim recited throughout all of the services, all of the tefillot of Yom Kippur. But if there's one tefillah which is made up overwhelmingly of Slichot and Yud Gimel Midot Rachamim, it's Nila. You say more Slichot there, at least in the way that we practice, more than in all of the other tefillot of the day. At night's a little bit different, till Nidrei night. And you say it over and over and over again. If you follow it's interesting when you follow the way that Ne'ilah is structured. You say a paragraph and you say Yud Gimel Midot. You say a paragraph and you say Yud Gimel Midot. On and on and on. There's almost something frenetic. I won't say obsessive, but there's something very incredibly frenetic and intensive about it. You can again and again and again and again and again and again until you reach up to a fever pitch. And the question, why? What's going on there? I think that the way that the function of Yud Gimel Midot, what they stand for, can tell us something about the atmosphere of the end of the day of Yom Kippur and the nature of Nila. Nila is what? Whether it's machloket between Rav and Shmuel, when we say closing or locking Nila, we're talking about locking the gates of the temple at the end of the service in the Beit HaMikdash. Or are we talking about the closing of the gates of heaven? But there is something last chance about it, very last chancey. So one gets the feeling in Ne'ilah that the reason why there's so much recitation of Yud Gimel Midot because there's sort of desperation involved. It's coming to the end of the day. Did we really do tshuva the way we were supposed to? Did we really confess we were supposed to? So you say over and over and over and over and over and over again because you can't get enough you can't say it enough to remind God because we feel so inadequate. I'll come back to that point in a second also. So our inadequacy is expressed in the constant repetition of the one aspect, of the one hook that God gave us to return to Him and to make the changes in our lives that we're supposed to, and to obtain as a result forgiveness. And then in Nila, after you've done on and on and on and on and on, you get to two paragraphs. Two paragraphs that Rav Soloveitchik used to like to highlight. Two paragraphs talk about the gift of Chuva, that Chuva is something which is really an extraordinary gift. Normally you can't undo the past, but Chuva allows you to undo the past and start anew. But before you get to the greatness of Chuva, there's a line that says, Ata noten yad lapushim. You give a hand to those who are sinners, those who are criminals. What does it feel like? It comes right after the recitation of the last of the Yud Gimel Midot. I would like to suggest to you that what happens in Nila, what we should let happen during Nila, is that even though we keep reciting Yud Gimel Midot and keep using language, at some stage of the ballgame we realize the absolute futility of our words, that language collapses, and that we have one choice and one choice only: to acknowledge our limitations and to realize that if we're going to really take advantage of the opportunity that Chuva gives us, that Yom Kippur gives us, that we have to ask for help. What do you mean, God, you give us a hand? Well, our hands are outstretched because we can't anymore. We can fix until a certain point, we can do up to a certain point, but without a significant amount of siyata d'shmaya, without the assistance of God intervening on our behalf and giving us a lift and pulling us out of the mud, we can't do it. Language collapses, our abilities collapse, and we realize that we are totally and unalterably dependent upon God as we complete the 25 hours of fasting and prayer, and maybe it's because it's easy to be a saint when you're on Yom Kippur. It's hard to be a saint when you leave Yom Kippur. Maybe that's what you're asking for. We're asking for help with. But at the end of the day, literally the end of the day, the theme of Nila is, in light of the Yud Gimel Midot, which empower man, empower the individual, that we also realize our own vulnerability and our own fundamental dependence upon God. Now, that idea that vulnerability and dependence are essential part of Yom Kippur is really the central part of Selihot as well. Selihot, for example, are supposed to recite it at night. It's interesting. Maimonides does not know anything about this before midnight, after midnight, nothing of the sort. But the Rambam knows that there's a wonderful practice. He endorses it emphatically, to get up at night and to stay and recite Selihot until the morning. But it could be 10 o'clock at night for 7 hours. He doesn't peg it to before and after nightfall. Before or after midnight. And it's it's an easy reason for that, because the distinction between before nightfall and midnight and after midnight has nothing to do with halakha. The proper practice is to get up in the middle of the night, to get up in the dark. Why it's in the dark? Because when you get up in the dark, A, it's scary. B, you feel vulnerable. C, it requires extra effort. D, the nature of nighttime embodies galut, it embodies vulnerability, it embodies the sense of being abandoned. And by getting up at night and reciting Selihot, you're basically saying, I am totally vulnerable, I am totally dependent upon God. And that angle, that aspect of total dependence that is at the center of Selihot, Again, because the Yud Gimel Midot, I can't repeat this enough, because the Yud Gimel Midot basically are the only hope that we have to get us out of our predicament, finds expression not very very frequently in the poems that precede the poems that are called Selihot, the penitential poems that lead into the recitation of the Yud Gimel Midot, because what their function is, unfortunately written in Hebrew, which is somewhat hard to get at sometimes. Their function is to lay out and express themes and ideas which are implicit in in the Yud Gimel Midot and everything related to the process of Chuva. As it happens, a lot of this is clearly expressed in the Slicha, the Pismon, that we recited actually Motzei Shabbat, when probably one of the best known of all the Slichot, but Motzei Menucha. So what I'd like to do is just read with you the first three stanzas, and you'll see what I mean. B'motzei Menucha kidamnucha tchila. After Shabbat, we have gotten up early to greet you. Now, why emphasize? Why do we start on Motzei Shabbat? Why start Motzei Shabbat? Now, the rule is that you have to have 4 days of Slichot before Rosh Hashanah. That's for another reasons I haven't got time to go into. But why start on Motzei Shabbat? I suggest it's because, not unlike what I mentioned in terms of the fear or the dread, or the sense of vulnerability which arises at the end of Yom Kippur. Similarly, Shabbat is a day of total involvement and being totally ensconced and enveloped in sanctity. And when Havdalah comes, you're sort of expelled into the secular, to the non-holy world. You're not supported. And what happens on Motzei Shabbat is, why do you want to extend Shabbat? Because the week seems scary. The week is an existential challenge. And so we are dafka going out and seeking out God again when we have a very, very vivid memory of what it meant to have to be enveloped in sanctity just a couple of hours before. So the first thing we do is B'motzei Menucha kidamnucha tchila. Hatos necham bimarom yoshev tila. Hark your ears from above, you who are in charge of you who sit and receive praise. Because if God was felt intimate during Shabbat because he came to visit us, as it were, now God's distance makes us feel distant from Him. Yud Gimel Midot, that's the bridge. You see how it comes in? Lishmoa el harina ve'elat tefillah. And then the next line, Et Yimin Oz Ora Lasot Chayil. Cause your right hand, with your strong right hand, to do great things. So it's interesting. The medieval commentaries on this line, in particular, a man whose name was Abraham ben Azriel of Bohemia, lived in the 13th century. He says that here we're asking God to basically to destroy Satan, to destroy all forms of evil which have led us astray. That's one way of interpreting it, but you could interpret it differently also. One of the things, what is the miracle of Chuva? The miracle of Chuva is the ability to be able to undo the past. Generally, you can't do that. What's past is past. But as Rav Soloveitchik points out in Isha Halacha, in the Halachic man, and as Maimonides says in the laws of Chuva, you're basically reborn. You undo everything. You start all over with the process of Chuva, and that's an act of tremendous power and manifestation of God's greatness. So you're saying, this, not only do we want to come close, but we want to have God come close enough to be able to change the world in which we live. B'tzedek ne'akav v'nishchat turorayel, and we are willing to not so much take the hit, but we are willing to take responsibility for our actions, bear the results of our actions, and live a sacrificial life, not sacrifice our life physically, God forbid, but rather to be able to take upon ourselves the commitments and the type of life that God wants us to keep. The same way that Isaac accepted that responsibility, and in his place was a ram was offered. And so we'll stick. Those are the two verses, but you see that here you have an example of a poem, whose intention was to sort of expand some of the implicit experiences and ideas which derive from the recitation of Yud Gimel Midot and the, what shall I call it, the choreography of acting out that accompanies it. Okay, so we have another 7 days until Rosh Hashanah. I am going to try to give a shir on Erev Chag. I can't guarantee it, but I'm going to try. If not, what I might do is I might pre-record and put it up. As always, you are invited to comment in the comments. Please share the video if you like it with your comments or without your comments. I want to get these discussions out. The video is going to be available on my YouTube page, here on Instagram. I'll tweet it out, and also there'll be an audio version which will be on YU Torah. So they finish changing using Format Factory to change the nature of the file. In the meantime, Shana Tova Muvurechet. Take care of yourselves. If you haven't gotten your third shot, go get your third shot, and we will see you next time. Bye.